What's Trending presented by Feastbox, donating 10% of every order to Full of Hope, a charitable organization that feeds hungry families. We are 1/4 of the way through the 2023 college football season. BYU 3-0. There are a bunch of 3-0 teams that face off this week. Very interesting, including BYU and Kansas, which is a very, very fun way to open up conference play and the Power 5 era officially for BYU as a member of the Big 12. But, Jarom, to adequately prepare for this, we wanted to look back at where we ranked each Big 12 game on BYU's schedule in 2023, from easiest to toughest, and then make some modifications because we've seen each of these teams at least a little bit. So let's re-rank each game and see how different it is compared to our preseason list, and notably where Kansas falls in this list. So let's start with your schedule from the preseason, Jarom.
So I had Texas, TCU, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Iowa State. I've made a couple of changes now that we've seen a few. So I keep Texas at the top. I move Oklahoma from 4 up to 2 because they are putting up 55 a game and only giving up 9. Kansas stays at 3. Kansas really good, by the way. Potent offense, fewest punts in the country, third and third down conversions. 5th in the country in TFLs.
They still have them at number 3.
Still have them at number 3. I dropped TCU to 4. Lots to prove, but still 2-1. Beat up Houston. Only lost to Colorado by 3. That's a respectable loss at this point. Texas Tech stays at 5. Texas Tech should be lower, but the bottom, the other ones stink. The other 4 stink. That's why they're below. West Virginia has moved up significantly because they beat Pitt. Cincinnati, I had to drop below them because they lost to Miami of Ohio.
At home.
Beat Pitt, but hey, even West Virginia did that. At Oklahoma State, 2-1, but lost 33-7 to South Alabama. Like, I could very easily put Oklahoma State as last, but I have Iowa State there. Arizona State stinks.
Exactly.
Iowa State I have at 9th because they're 1-2. Oklahoma State does have a Power 5 win over a stinky Arizona State team. But I have Iowa State 1-2. They lost to Ohio 10-7. Controversy on a field goal, as we mentioned, that looked like it was in. They didn't call that. That's bad. The bottom 4 early look very winnable. West Virginia, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. I've got Texas, Oklahoma, and TCU. Like, those feel like upsets if BYU wins those 3. Kansas and Texas Tech feel like 50-50 kind of games. This Saturday and then coming up for homecoming in a couple of weeks, Texas Tech. So I'm seeing 4 wins. I'm seeing potentially 3 losses, and there's 2 pick'ems. And that will swing whether BYU gets on the high side of 500 or not.
Okay. So your big mover was Oklahoma.
Up 2 spots, TCU down 2 spots. Yep.
Okay, a couple of decent moves there. My preseason list featured Texas and at TCU, the 2 toughest road trips. Those stay the same in my new list, okay? Followed by Oklahoma. So you and I differ a little bit on TCU and Oklahoma. I think the Sooners are legit, but playing in November on senior night in Provo, I still feel like a road trip to TCU is going to be tougher. I think TCU is good. I feel like they're figuring some things out. I think they have a really solid offense. They can score. When BYU gets there in mid-October, I feel like TCU will be a better team than we saw against Colorado and early in the season. That game still worries me a lot. And playing on the road in that stadium is always tough. And they're doing their best to not allow BYU fans into that stadium as well.
You can't control the secondary market, though, right? Like, they just control the original tickets there.
TCU and Oklahoma right there with each other, but Oklahoma I still have at number 3. But they are up 1 spot in my list. Texas Tech has fallen. You lose at Wyoming, yeah, you're going to drop a spot in the toughest games rankings. Kansas is up 2. I'm a believer in Kansas. I wasn't sure what they were going to be in year 2 when Jalen Daniels came back.
Well, everybody but one starter on offense.
Okay, they're really good on offense. I still like BYU's chances to win this game, especially because the weather could be very, very weird on Saturday.
Oh, what's it going to be like?
Thunderstorms.
Oh, boy.
Rain.
Uh-oh. Does BYU have to run the ball?
It's going to get a little
run the ball
weird.
Here?
It's going to be humid. It could be super weird because of weather. Kansas, to me, feels like middle of the pack. This is a good start for BYU and a good way to gauge what they are in the Big 12 as they open up conference play. And then I'm with you. At West Virginia, Cincinnati, at Oklahoma State, Iowa State. We have exactly the same bottom four.
Don't look very good right now.
So my big movers were Kansas +2 up to number 5, Oklahoma State down 2 to number 8. The Cowboys and the Cyclones at 8 and 9 are just in a world of hurt right now. Oklahoma State doesn't have a quarterback. Who was it?
What do you mean? They have like 4. They all got like hurt or are inept. The 2 eyes have bit them.
That's brutal. Who was it that posted, hey, I'm going to keep my grandma in this jail cell until Mike Gundy
declares a quarterback?
Yes. Very funny account. But, yeah, the top 5 are all like, yikes. These are going to be significant challenges
tough
for
games,
BYU.
yeah.
But I feel like BYU should beat. Even on the road, even if it's a noon kickoff in Morgantown, 2 time zones. I feel like BYU is a better team than West Virginia.
Yeah, I do think one of those will surprise us. One of those
it typically
4 games.
does. There's a game that's like
those
crap.
are Power 5 teams. There's a couple of tough roadies there. You got to show up, and so hopefully BYU is a perfect 4-0 against those bottom 4. The reality is, Spencer, chances are one of those comes up and bites you in a way you didn't expect. Yeah. But
the reality is that BYU typically wins one of those games.
BYU will do that too to somebody else, and maybe that's TCU. Maybe that's Texas. Who knows? Okay, so now let's discuss this. Where do you see BYU fitting among all 14 teams in the Big 12 at this moment?
If we had like a power rankings list, and it's tough because, not surprisingly, as we anticipated when the season began, it feels like a lot of teams are really close to each other in terms of talent. I know you can look at BYU's 3-0 record and say, oh, they're better automatically than Texas Tech and TCU. It's not that simple.
Texas Tech has 2 losses, but at Wyoming, that one's weird. But at home to Oregon is not a bad loss.
Oregon's a really good team.
It was a 1-score game.
Yes, and Texas Tech, unfortunately for them, was in great position to win both of those games.
Yeah,
a few plays go their way, and they're 3-0, and they're ranked in the top 15. Like, that's how fickle the beginning of a college football season can be.
They're a good team.
So I'm still high on Texas Tech. I would put BYU right smack in the middle. It's either number 7 or number 8.
I have, as currently constituted, BYU as high as 4.
Really?
Because who else has shown you something incredible? Like Texas, the win at Alabama, clearly the best team in the league. Oklahoma has done nothing not to deserve number 2 right now to me.
I agree.
Kansas, to me, has looked really efficient. And then defensively, they have 28 TFLs. Like, they got a little bit of defense going. Granted, they played Illinois and Nevada, like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'm verdict's out because of the Nevada
But
game.
they've been efficient. Like, I'll take super efficient against, whatever competition over, well, you lost, but it was a decent team. Like, that's why I have Kansas above Texas Tech. TCU is good. Right there, but I have BYU basically ahead of Texas Tech at number 4 at the moment. BYU did not play great against Sam Houston. Defensively they did, not offensively. Did what they needed to do against SU, and then they showed some real grit on the road against Arkansas on the road. Like, is that the second best road win in the league to Texas at Alabama at this point right now? I give a lot of stock into BYU going and getting that particular win. Now, could they be 5 or 6? Yeah, whatever. BYU is in the upper echelon of the Big 12 at the moment, which is pretty exciting. You beat Kansas, now you start to make some waves. You beat Cincinnati, now there's talk of BYU being one of the top kind of 4 teams in the league.
What is UCF at the moment? Where are UCF and Kansas State, though, in your list?
UCF hasn't played anybody, but they
won at Boise State.
Right, 18-16, not a super, again.
Still Kansas, tough to win there.
Kansas is, it's not that hard the last couple of years, actually. Villanova. So, yeah, UCF's good, too, but I have them behind BYU because at Boise State, not as good as at Arkansas.
Yeah, for sure. Kansas State, I still think I have Texas, Oklahoma, TCU, Kansas State for sure above BYU. But then I feel like the Cougars are muddled in the middle and Kansas too. So those are the top 5. And then I feel like BYU is muddled in there between 6 and 8 with Texas Tech.
Kansas State did not do what BYU did, which was win on the road against an SEC team. And Missouri worse than Arkansas.
You think? So
I give BYU more credit for that.
You think Missouri's worse than Arkansas? I don't know.
Especially because Kansas State took it to Missouri last year by 28. Okay, you didn't show up in year 2. You know what BYU did? They lost by 17 last year. They went and won the game on the road. So I'm not taking into account last year. I'm just taking into account what I've seen this year. And what I've seen so far is that BYU is the top 4, 5, 6
Hey,
in the league.
I love
That can
it.
change very quickly. Like, if
they lose
BYU
to
gets
Kansas?
destroyed this week, yeah, you're back to like 7, 8, 9. But if you win that, you stay in the hunt with with TCU and Texas Tech, and Kansas State and UCF is kind of that second tier after Texas, Oklahoma, and it would seem, well, those two.
If
TCU
BYU wins
pressuring
at
them.
Kansas,
Yeah.
I will join you in the BYU as a top 5 Big 12 team. But right now, like that, frankly, improbable win against Arkansas. Like they found a way, to their credit, and it was awesome. But I'm not ready to say, yep, right now, top 4. I need to see more. So if BYU wins at Kansas, they have earned it. They have earned a top 5 designation in the Big 12. It's fun. I'm glad that we do this. I don't think we look back enough at some of our preseason predictions and kind of recalibrate. I like it when we do that, and it's fun to see how things change.
This is only one Big 12 game has been played. TCU blew out Houston 36-13, and then now it begins this week. Let's go.
Beat Kansas, then BYU's probably ranked. Like it would.
Yeah, I would expect BYU at 4-0 with 2 P5 wins, both on the road, to be 24-25 on Monday. And if not, they're the first, second.
Oh man, you got all types of momentum. Then coming home for Cincinnati.
Then you win the game that I have said there is no way that BYU loses.
Still feel good about that?
Yeah, I do. Especially with the Miami of Ohio victory over said Bearcats last week.
Yeah, when Cincinnati beat Pittsburgh, we paused a little bit and thought,
Paused, Bearcat pun, nice.
But Pittsburgh is bad.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh is bad.
Pitt's really bad. So hard to know. But Miami of Ohio, I'm like, that's not even Miami.
Okay.
Miami of Ohio.
Our question of the day. And after BYU beat Arkansas, I think all of us collectively in the BYU media and BYU fan base felt like, okay, BYU's going to a bowl game now. They've won 3 games already. They will figure out a way to win at least 3 games in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Okay, and frankly, going 3-6 in the Big 12 after the 3-0 start
be a bummer.
would kind of feel like a disappointment.
Oh, yeah. That'd be a lot of L's, bro.
Okay.
That'd be a lot of L's.
For a losing record in the Big 12 right now would still give you 7 wins on the season.
I'll take 4 and 5 right now without playing it.
Okay, so with BYU, all of us thinking the Cougars are going to make a bowl game. As long as BYU makes it to a bowl game, do you care where BYU finishes in the Big 12 standings?
Do you?
Yes, I do, because bowl games matter.
I do too.
The type of bowl game, the location, the opponent, the money involved, all of that matters.
I don't care about the money because it's split by evenly anyway. But I would love to see BYU playing a game they haven't played in before, or go back to the Liberty Bowl.
If BYU is a top
good
5
bowl game.
team,
Kansas went there
if
last
you
year.
call it you're like, hey, is there a top 4 team by when all is said and done?
There's an order to this.
They're going to play in a great bowl game.
It would be 5 would be Liberty.
And 4 would be what?
It goes Sugar, Alamo, Pop-Tarts,
Holiday?
Texas, Liberty, rate, guaranteed rate. Holiday's not in there.
Holiday Bowl, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I saw a Holiday Bowl projection, but they have a secondary tie to that game.
Yes, and next year when the Pac-12 may or may not exist, probably not what happens with Washington State and Oregon State, that could become a game that the Big 12 picks up, given the 4 Pac-12 entries.
At BYU Maximus on X answers the question, does he care where BYU finishes in the Big 12 as long as BYU makes a bowl game? Given the dismal performance of teams in the conference we expected more from, I want to see BYU in the top 4 or 5.
Yeah.
If BYU continues with weekly improvement, there are no teams that scare me. No teams.
Texas always intimidates me, even in 13-14 when BYU took care of business. Like, they still are so talented.
He continues, and only 3 or 4 that are currently clearly superior. Just a matter of growth and then home or road.
Who's clearly superior on paper? Texas, Oklahoma, TCU. I don't know that TCU is clearly superior. I would just say Texas and Oklahoma at the moment. Those are the only 2, in my opinion, in the league.
I'm not ready to say right now BYU is better than Kansas State. I think Kansas State's a good program. They lost on a 61-yard field.
I know. They don't play them. I don't really care that much.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But,
Well, Kansas State just lost to Missouri. Why is they're not clearly superior? It's Texas and Oklahoma at the moment. But let's see what Oklahoma does this season. Let's see where they're at later. Let's see if Texas can maintain this greatness or not. Like, if BYU can figure something out. Again, BYU very flawed. Go and beat Kansas, continue on, and then let's see where you're at.